Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Why No One Plays. It's a series I have running on my channel where I talk about champions in League of Legends that are rarely seen in solo queue and the professional scene, especially in the past few years. In the most recent Why Everyone Plays video, I covered Kha'Zix, a really popular jungler. So how about we match that for the sister series by talking about an unpopular jungler, Shyvana the Half-Dragon. She's had a really colorful history over the years, no doubt an odd specimen to cover. Shyvana's not the most obscure champion given that she's had pockets of fame several times ever since Season 5, but my criteria for choosing champions to make a video for is if their median play rate is less than 4%, and for her it's way lower. Anyways, let's get the standard procedure out of the way. If this is your first time watching one of my League videos, I just want to say welcome and to also address you with a quick disclaimer, especially to the Shyvana mains out there. The Why No One Plays series is not meant to be taken literally. Obviously there are people who still play Shyvana, otherwise I wouldn't be making this video. And while I will be looking at the champion in question very critically, it's not with the intent to say that they're unviable or bad to play, quite the opposite. The point behind the series is to bring to light possible reasons as to why they're not as popular to pick up compared to others, and to encourage players who are looking for someone new to try out to look past those flaws and see if they enjoy playing them. So if you enjoyed watching this video, then once you're done, a rating would be much appreciated, and share your own thoughts about Shyvana in the comment section below. After you're done, consider checking out my other Why No One Plays videos. There is a link to the playlist in the video description down below. That covers the intro, so let's just talk about Shyvana, and I have a lot to say about her. See, of the over 20 champions I talked about in Why No One Plays, only 2 of them are junglers. The cool thing about jungle is that the meta drastically shifts every year in solo queue and the professional scene. For a period of time, it could be tank meta where the top tier junglers are Sejuani, Zac, and Nunu. In a few months, we could see a shift to mage junglers like Fiddlesticks, Karthus, and Taliyah. Perhaps shortly after, we might see a rise in skirmishers like Lee Sin, Vi, and Graves. And then after, there might be an assassin meta with Kha'Zix, Elise, and Evelynn. Because the state of jungle is always tumultuous, just about every champion gets a chance to take the first place crown for a few patches or more. Shyvana no doubt has had her fair share of the limelight too. As I mentioned before, she's had periods where she was basically a top tier jungler. And the funny thing is, she was never really the same in any of her heydays. At one point you saw her go Feral Flare back when it was still around, I think in like Season 3, Season 4, and you would build full on hit, and then after that it was changed to Sated Devour, which was then changed to Blood Razor, Frozen Mallet full tank, and recently we see her going full AP Torpedo Missile that quite honestly does an unfair amount of damage for how simple the ability is to land. No other champion I've covered this far has had such a dynamic shift in build options over their lifetime, except maybe Udyr. But Shyvana has somewhat of a different problem plaguing her that I don't think anyone else has, and it doesn't pertain much to her kit. She's classified as a juggernaut by the wiki, but that isn't so much the case anymore given her current popular AP build. One thing we do know about her is that she's a power farmer, possessing some of the best clearing speed in the game. Basically her win condition is to scrounge up a massive bag of gold and beat people to death with it. Those who've been playing since Season 4 probably remember the power farming meta where champions like Master Yi, Shyvana, Aatrox, those that could easily clear jungle camps without taking too much damage and rack up massive stacks on Devourer or Feral Flare, became insanely broken due to being an unexaggerated literal 1v9 death machine just by AFK farming all game. Exil made a video on this about 6 months ago where he talked about the history of hard carry junglers, which I recommend you check out because it provides extra context that makes it easier to understand why Shyvana has such a troubled past. There aren't many champions left in the game that are susceptible to indirect buffs and nerfs because Riot has been slowly phasing them out through reworks, but Shyvana is one of them, and this actively hurts her retention rate. Usually the way a champion becomes stronger or weaker is if they directly change that champion, such as increasing or decreasing their base numbers, ratios, adding or removing properties to their abilities, stuff like that. But sometimes champions are indirectly affected by changes made to the items that they built. For example, Lee Sin took a hard hit when they removed Tracker's Knife and Sightstone, preventing him from having easy access to wards. He's still a viable jungler, but losing easy access to ward hops definitely hurt his tempo and options overall. On the flip side, recently there was a pretty big increase to Aatrox's win rate with the new preseason items. He's always been stuck at sort of like a 47 to 48% win rate after his rework because he was really difficult to play well, and after he got nerfed a whole bunch of times from being just too strong in pro play as well as the myriad of weak points that several top laners could exploit almost effortlessly, Aatrox just was never able to really get past that rut. Not to mention he didn't really synergize too well with items, but ever since the inclusion of the new mythic item Gore Drinker, it gave Aatrox a very solid first item purchase that greatly augmented his sustain in combat by combining the active slash with the bonus healing gained from his ultimate. And that would even get stronger the longer the game went on, to the point where Aatrox could literally heal for like 80% of his maximum health with a single usage of Gore Drinker in the late game. This was able to boost his win rate to a solid 50% right smack dab in the middle. And frankly, that's all he really needed. His abilities were fine, he just needed better items. Every champion can have their performance and popularity affected by changes in item builds, but the factor to consider is to what degree they are affected. Certain champions remain consistently strong at what they do, even amidst several shifts to their build, such as Renekton, who went through changes to the Conqueror rune, then Spear of Shojin, then Blade of the Ruined King, now Gore Drinker and Eclipse, while still remaining relatively in the same spot and being pretty consistent at what he does. Unfortunately, that is not a luxury for our Demi-Dragon. Shyvana stands as one of the champions most vulnerable to indirect changes. Naturally, this means she's unreliable to main for extended periods of time, and only really a strong pick when the meta and conditions are favorable for her, which are usually through her items. And the reason lies in her very curious scaling. Fury of the Dragonborn grants her bonus armor and magic resist with every dragon killed. Not to mention she does bonus damage to dragons, which lets her take objectives ludicrously fast. Twin Bite is an auto attack reset that strikes twice, applying on-hit effects both times. It's also armed with a refresh from every auto attack. In other words, this ability scales very well off of attack speed and on-hit effects. Burnout grants her a damaging aura and a boost of movement speed that she can extend the duration of by auto-attacking. Not only that, but every time she hits with Burnout active, she does AoE magic damage. More attack speed means more applications of Burnout. Then we have Flame Breath, which shoots a fireball that marks enemies, letting her deal % max health damage against that target. When she's in dragon form, the fireball gains a humongous boost in damage and leaves a scorched area that does damage over time. If you decide to capitalize on the on-hit damage, more attack speed lets you gain that. If you want to hit like a truck in a single hit, full AP. Dragon's Descent operates on a resource bar rather than a cooldown, regenerating slowly over time but also through basic attacks. The more attacks you can get off, the more often you can have your ultimate. The dash and damage don't matter too much since the only benefit to this ability is if you build AP, but I think you get what I'm trying to say. Shyvana is extremely reliant on items. I mean, so is every other champion in the game, right? It's a little confusing why I list this as a con initially when this is a design feature of the game. There are other champions that scale exponentially with items in the game such as Vladimir, Fiora, most of the AD carries, Master Yi, so on and so forth. But the reason why it hurts Shyvana is because she has two completely separate playstyles. You can either play her as a melee bruiser similar to Udyr, where she runs up to people and smacks them in the face until they die, or you play her as an artillery mage who chucks fireballs at you until you burn to death. The catch is that you can only do one or the other, you can't do both at the same time. Half of her kit scales off of attack speed and on hit, and the other half scales off of ability power, meaning any items you build to boost the damage of Flame Breath and Dragon's Descent will do nothing for Twin Bite and Burnout. Building attack speed and on-hit items to synergize with the bonus on-hit effects that she gets from her kit will also mean that your burst damage from Dragon's Descent and Flame Breath will be very low. Even though she has some of the best scaling in the game with items, she only gains half the benefit from every item purchase. This requires her to either have way more items than everyone else to beat them, or the items she builds have to be ridiculously overpowered. The reason she was so strong back then was not because of her, it was because of Sated Devourer and Feral Flare, and then again because of Runic Echoes, one of the best items in the game's history and why there were so many insanely powerful AP junglers like Evelynn, Karthus, Echo, Fiddlesticks, and Nunu between Season 8 and 10, the time period in which you build AP on Shyvana instead of on hit. At any point in time, where the items available to her were either average or below average, she's completely tanked in play rate and win rate because literally every other jungler could do her job better at that point. There's only really one item in the game that takes care of both sides to a reasonable extent, and that's Nashor's Tooth. During the preseason update, it gained 20 more ability power and 10% more AP scaling to the on-hit damage, but in exchange, it lost 20% cooldown reduction, which is a massive net loss for Shyvana because cooldown reduction allows her to use Flame Breath more often. The reason why you would want to build Nashor's is because it gave you a large chunk of AP, that is true. But 20% CDR is invaluable given that before Season 11, most high AP items with CDR carried mana, which is a useless stat for her. In fact, as I'm making this video, she's been severely hurt by the preseason changes due to losing access to the 2-item power spike being Runic Echoes and Nashor's Tooth. It gave her massive burst damage, a lot of ability power, and 30% cooldown reduction, which became 40% with the blue buff. And since she was a power farm jungler, she could usually get those two items by 15 minutes or less, given how cheap Runic Echoes was for its immense value. Aside from her Torpedo Missile build, Shyvana's other build path is on hit, capitalizing on her attack speed scaling and % damage. which can easily make her a very threatening duelist and tank shredder because by mid to late game she can easily do 50% max health damage in a few seconds, more specifically hybrid damage. Taking Blood Razor and Blade of the Ruined King gives her a lot of physical max health damage, and Flame Breath gives her magic damage, which means she can be very hard to itemize against. This is a very good thing to have if Shyvana actually had a kit that enabled her to do so. When you think of fast rapid attackers like Jax, Master Yi, Tryndamere, Irelia, and whatnot, each of them usually come armed with gap closers, which allows them to make full use of those items because they're able to get in range to auto-attack very consistently. Not only that, but they also have built-in protection, like Jax's Counter-Strike, Tryndamere's Q and Ultimate, Irelia's Blade Surge to dodge skill shots, and Defiant Dance to tank heavy burst. Master Yi has Alpha Strike and Meditation for the same purposes as Irelia. Shyvana lacks both a consistent dash and self-peel. Her ultimate does allow her to travel a decent range, but the animation cast time is very slow. Burnout gives her movement speed to get closer on targets, but it's nowhere near as reliable as a gap closer like Alpha Strike. Lastly, because she lacks built-in defense to help her survive returning fire, Shyvana is forced to build resistances. Having to do so is usually not a problem for most other bruisers, since they can still deliver punishment with only 1 or 2 attack items, but on-hit scales like a parabola, meaning 1 or 2 on-hit items generally aren't enough to compensate in damage because remember, they usually don't come with much attack damage, at least not before the item system rework this preseason. At most, Shyvana was only allowed to build maybe 1 or 2 on-hit damage items like Blood Razor and Blade of the Ruined King, or Gwynce's Rage Blade before she would have to go tank to keep herself alive. Consequently, it meant she would never be able to fully reach that 1v9 chainsaw potential the way someone like Master Yi could with 4 to 5 on-hit items. I know I keep bringing up Master Yi, but for all intents and purposes, if we were talking purely attack speed on-hit builds, he's an infinitely better Shyvana. Faster damage, faster mobility, not as bulky, but more outplay potential. If we talk about AP Shyvana, she's a downgrade to most other AP junglers because aside from Dragon's Descent, Flame Breath is the only ability she has that scales off of AP. And while it hits like a semi-truck into a brake-checking sedan, if you miss that ability, you essentially are useless for the next 5 to 8 seconds depending on your cooldown reduction. Combining that with a really poor usage of items, and you have someone who at best can never really excel, only perform at maybe an above average level. That being said, if you have a really good understanding of jungle clearing, reading the map, and maximizing tempo, there are a lot of games where I've seen a level 18 Shyvana while everyone else was still level 13, and her Torpedo Fireball does like 1500 damage. It's a pretty fun cheese strategy because even to this day, everyone underestimates just how fast she can steal jungle camps, clear out dragons, and deal the same burst damage as an assassin but with a ranged attack. Pragmatically speaking, it's not a very viable strategy, but she can be very fun if you know how to minimize her shortcomings. She just has a lot of them. Shyvana needs a rework, and fortunately she is on the list of champions that Riot plans to do a full visual gameplay update on in the future. I'm curious to see what they plan to do with her because right now she's like a house that's being held up with duct tape, the duct tape being items. Her kit is so messed up that the only thing keeping her from being completely unviable is her item build, which is a terrible condition for any champion to have. But that about covers it for this episode. Again, please share your thoughts on Shyvana in the comment section below. Positive or negative, I'd love to hear what you have to say about her. Also, if you have any ideas for how you should rework her, you should share that as well. In my other Why No One Plays videos, I've seen some really curious ones, so please keep them coming. To all the Shyvana mains out there, what did you think of the video? Do you agree or disagree with the points I made? Or do you think there's something I forgot about? Let me know about that as well. Thanks to everyone who made it to the end, hope you enjoyed it. Once again, if you'd like to support my channel, best way you can do so is by liking the video, leaving a comment down below, sharing this video with your friends, and subscribing to the channel. If you still have time and would like to watch some more, check out the playlist in the video description down below and watch some of my other Why No One Plays videos, I would appreciate it very much. Lastly, don't forget to catch me on Twitch for my live streams, follow me on Twitter, and consider donating to my Patreon. But for now, thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see you again soon for the next video. Take care.